Welcome to The Deepening, a podcast that explores the inner journey and its relationship to our outer life through the lens of Jungian psychology, spirituality, and personal transformation. I'm your host, Suzanne Larue. Let's journey inward together. In this episode, I speak with Lisa Marchiano. Lisa is a Jungian analyst, author, and podcaster. Today we talk about her book, Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams, which she co-authored with Deborah Stewart and Joseph Lee, her co-hosts from the popular depth psychology podcast, This Jungian Life. Lisa is on the faculty of the C.G. Jung Institute of Philadelphia, and she lectures and teaches widely. Well, hi, Lisa. Thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Mhm.
You know, it's interesting. I was helping my daughter study for a psychology exam this week, and they covered a couple theories about dreams.
Oh,
There was one that says dreams are basically the brain's way of making sense of random neural activity when we're sleeping, and another that suggests that we dream in order to consolidate memories and process the information from our day. And I was thinking how dry these theories are, and, they make sense from a biological perspective, but
but they take all the magic out of it, don't they?
yeah, they don't speak to the mystery and the meaning and the soul of dreaming.
No, they certainly don't.
So I thought maybe we could begin right there with the Jungian perspective. From your view, why do we dream?
Well, the interesting thing is that the ancients believed that dreams were the way the gods spoke to us. So that's a kind of through line in most ancient cultures, and that feels much more in line, I think, with what Jung would say than what these modern scientific theories purport. I mean, Jung, first of all, said that he didn't have much of a theory about dreams, but he did believe that they were meaningful, that they weren't just random. And it's hard to spend your life working with dreams, studying your own dreams, working with dreams in clinical practice without knowing that dreams are meaningful. I mean, I've worked with people where it was really their dream material that led us to the topics that we needed to discuss. You can follow someone's psychological growth trajectory by looking at the way the dreams change. I know my dreams have provided me with important guidance at key moments of my life. So, yeah, I think we have to believe that dreams are meaningful. Jung felt that dreams are the way the unconscious speaks to us. It's the way the unconscious delivers its wisdom, lets us know how we look from the perspective of the unconscious, where we might be off base a little bit. It's the way the unconscious brings forward what might be missing in the conscious attitude. And it's the way that we can access the psychospiritual elements of the psyche, I would say.
Maybe in thinking about all that, it would be helpful to talk about individuation and the idea that each of us carries a kind of inner blueprint and a guiding companion within.
Mm-hmm. The Jungian analyst James Hillman expressed it as, every acorn has within it the blueprint for an oak tree. There's something that every acorn is meant to become. And if it lands on the right kind of soil or finds its way to the right circumstances, it will unfold into an oak tree. And in a similar way, each of us comes into this world with something that we're meant to become. And our unconscious psychological goal is to unfold into that thing as fully as we can, knowing that certainly it's rare, if not impossible, to ever fully realize all of our potential, but that we're striving throughout the lifespan to become the fullest version of ourselves possible.
So, if individuation is this process of realizing our fullest potential, then what role does this inner companion play, especially in our dreams?
Well, Hellman said that it's our inner daimon. It's the unconscious that holds that sense of destiny, that has some sense of which way we're meant to go. Jung called that part of the psyche the self with a capital S. And the unconscious knows how we're meant to be unfolding, and it can nudge us in that direction as we dream. So you could think about Each dream we have is like a little letter from the unconscious or from the self saying, Marie Louise von Franz says, do a little bit more of this, maybe a little bit less of that. You're kind of off base over here. But if you keep on getting nudged, you're going to move forward along your path in the direction that you were meant to. So that's how dreams help us with individuation.
I love that. I love discovering that when I became interested in Jungian psychology. This idea of
Mhm.
first that we actually already carry within us all that we need to know about who we're meant to become. And that, secondly, that there's a part of us that's actually there supporting us and trying to guide us if we would only listen towards that expression. It's
Mhm.
just so comforting. It makes you feel like you have a companion for life.
Yes, there is a part of you that cares very much about your unfolding and how you're doing, and it wants you to thrive.
Yeah, you write that dreams are a compass to our true becoming. And you've kind of already hinted at this, but what are some of the ways that our dreams sort of help us become who we're meant to be?
Well, one way to think about it is that the dream always comments on, or let's say almost always. I don't think there are any absolutes in dream interpretation or in the psyche for that matter, but dreams generally comment on the conscious attitude and where the conscious attitude is wrong. So, Jung didn't believe that the unconscious was all knowing, but he did believe that the unconscious knew something different than consciousness. So the unconscious kind of brings in what we're missing. The conscious attitude can be very one sided. So the dream will let us know the part that's been forgotten or has been repressed or we don't want to know about. So I think that it's constantly like little course corrections. If I'm not a sailor, but as I
Mhm.
understand it, when you're sailing, you have to kind of tack. You have to make these course corrections all the time to make sure that you're going in the direction that you want to go. And dreams are sort of like that.
Yeah, so we don't want to say always, but dreams are often trying to show us something we don't already know. And they're
Yes.
kind of acting as a corrective to our conscious life.
Yep.
So, do you have an example of that? I mean, one of the things I love about the book is how there are so many wonderful dream examples.
Mhm.
Could you share an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite dreams in the book is this dream that this man in his late 50s had. He'd been working as a physician and he had this dream that he needed to get his watch fixed. So he had this gold watch and there was like a piece falling off. He brings it to the watchmakers. The watchmakers give it back to him in pieces and say, "This is not even worth it. It's a cheap movement." And the man says, "Oh, but it's 14 karat gold. Look, right here it says 14 karat gold." And the watchmakers say, "No, it's really just gold plate. It's only 14 karat gold, just a tiny part of it." And so the I in the dream, the man, brings his watch back home in pieces in a little plastic bag and is very upset and like angry at the watchmakers. And so this dreamer said to me, well, I think that dream was really about how, there's this guy at work who's trying to get it over on me. He's always looking to pull a fast one. And I was like, I don't think that's what that dream is
Mhm.
about. Because this is someone who has been feeling increasingly burnt out, I suppose, with his career as a physician. He sort of feels like it's running its course and he's beginning to think about retirement and wondering what might come next in his life. And the watch in the dream is a watch that he actually owns. He purchased it with money that his grandparents gave him when he graduated from college. So the watch represents a certain kind of worldly success, academic success, the value of his parents and grandparents who very much wanted him to be a doctor. And he did. He lived life according to those values. And the watch represents all of that. And the watch is it served its function for a long time. He had a good life. But those values no longer serve him, except maybe one small part of it is pure gold.
Mhm, mhm.
But it might be time to retire that watch
Yeah.
and begin to live life according to a new set of values.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it seems like he's in this process of leaving those values behind, and the dream serves as a little signpost along that road. Again, it's just most dreams are just a little nudge.
Yeah, I love that von Franz quote that you referenced earlier about dreams being like letters that the self writes to us every night,
Yes.
telling us to do a little bit more of this and a little bit less of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me think of this kind of humorous dream I had where,
Uh-huh.
I've been very busy and involved in some somewhat intense things going on for my children in their lives and kind of maybe overly involved, one might say. And certainly at the expense of some of the things that are going on in my own life and my own needs and so forth. And I had this very cliche dream in which I was out in the street giving one of my kids instruction at their car window when my own car drove off without me,
Oh, wow.
right? And it went careening towards a daycare place down the street from us that actually does exist. And in the dream, there are all these dads outside with their kids. And fortunately, it didn't hit anyone, but it was like this very close call.
Hmm.
And it felt kind of like a wake up call.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that you needed to drive your own car.
Yeah. Get a little less involved maybe in directing others and a little bit more behind my own wheel.
Mhm. Mhm. Sometimes it's not easy to see what the message is that the dream has for us. And I think we can feel comforted knowing that even if we don't understand it, the dream is doing its work and delivering its medicine. Jung said as much, and it speeds up psychological development when we work with dreams. So it intensifies it, it speeds it up, makes things conscious more quickly so that we can get on our way.
Yeah, even with that dream, it's like I thought to myself, okay, maybe this is kind of telling me, that I've lost direction, that there's something
Mm,
autonomous within me that has taken over. And I was thinking about patterns in my life that really were rearing up in these situations within my family. And it's
yeah.
like, is that true? Is that what the unconscious wanted me to know? But in a way, it doesn't really matter, for two reasons. Because of what you're saying, that on some deeper level, something is integrated even without my conscious awareness, but
Mhm.
also the exploration of it led me to some insights and
Mhm.
into some realizations about what's going on that are useful.
Yeah, and it's really not possible to exhaust a dream either. I mean, we could probably discuss that dream for days. Even this idea that it's headed toward the daycare center, and what does that mean? It's endangering, perhaps this, as you point out, this kind of autonomous tendency is endangering some tender new life
Mhm.
or something about dads and the father principle.
Yeah.
Just to not to belabor it, but just to make the point that dreams always have these multiple levels, and there's many different ways we can engage with them and understand them.
Yeah, I mean, I could think about the inner child and what a daycare center represents and go on
Right.
and on. And I
Yep.
wasn't going to mention this, but one of my favorite things about dreams is how they often play with puns. And in this
Yes.
one, when I saw those dads, I immediately thought Dada, which is the French art movement that preceded surrealism and embraced the irrational. And since you mentioned
Oh.
the father principle, it struck me that they're like its shadow side.
Right, right, that's really interesting. Yeah, so it's kind of both, right? That image is that image of all the fathers is so multifaceted. Right. It's true that dreams often use wordplay and puns, and sometimes they're really funny. They like to be hyperbolic and very dramatic, and sometimes they really use humor. So it's such a rich creative space to be in dialogue with your dreams.
Yeah, I remember in the book you said something about how in order to be creative, we need access to the unconscious. And I was
Mhm.
thinking when I read that also in order to access the unconscious, we need to be creative.
Mhm.
So I love that it is this creative dialogue, between these different aspects of
Mhm.
ourselves.
Mhm.
Well, I want to move on to talking about some of the tips and keys in the book for working with our dreams. But before we do, I just wanted to kind of circle back to this conversation about the inner companion. And I wanted to just mention that I love that you say in the book that the dream maker loves you. And
Yeah.
again, just coming back to that wonderful feeling of this is a voice that is here to support us, that really wants to guide us. And I feel that sense of love now after having worked with dreams for so long. And I love the dream maker. I
Yeah.
mean, it's to a point where it's like when I become very busy, or maybe I've gone out and I've had a glass of wine and I don't remember my dreams. I don't like that. I miss it. I want to
Mhm.
be in
Mhm.
communication with it.
Yeah, it can feel a bit like a small but significant self-betrayal to, I don't know, roll over and grab your phone and start scrolling before you've just let yourself sit with what you might have dreamt last night and write it down. Or like you say, to not get proper sleep or drink too much or whatever, so that you interrupt that process of being able to engage with your dreams. It feels like a real sort of spiritual practice to set yourself up for success, to remember your dreams. And then when you do remember one, at least to write it down and hopefully find some time to work with it.
Well, so in the book, you provide 69 keys for working with our dreams.
Mhm.
And it's such a great resource. I love that you can get really deep into dream work with this. If you use all of these keys, you can go really deep with it.
Mhm.
But you can also get started right away, just within the first few chapters by using the first few keys.
Yep.
And I felt too that the book feels like it's really accessible for people who are just starting, but it provides enough richness for those of us who've already been doing a lot of dream work.
That's great. That's what I was hoping for.
So I'm curious, what are a few keys you think are most important for people to understand if they're just getting started?
Yeah. So first of all, just about the keys, this was our idea as a way because the thing about dreams is because it shows us the perspective of the unconscious, we are unconscious of the thing that we're being shown. So it's hard to see. Marie Louise von Franz says at some point that you can't see your own back. And trying to understand your own dreams is much harder than trying to understand someone else's dream because it's like trying to see your back. It's the thing that you don't have in your field of vision. So, what we wanted to do with the keys was provide these little prompts that would hopefully be a way in to unlock these other perspectives. And, it covers a lot of ground. A lot of different Jungian concepts are reflected in those 69 keys. But just to give you an example of one that I think is really powerful, there's this idea that was first articulated by one of Jung's. He was in analysis with Jung and he himself became an analyst. His name was Layard. And he said everything in the dream is just as it should be, except perhaps the attitude of the dream ego. So another way to translate that is the attitude of the dream ego is likely to be wrong. It's not always wrong. Again, it's not always wrong, but it could possibly be wrong. And in fact, it's probably more often wrong than not. So this doesn't work if there's no conflict in a dream. And most of the time there is some conflict in the dream. There's some conflict, there's something that goes wrong, like your dream or the gold watch dream I just said. And in those cases, you can ask yourself, what if the attitude of the dream ego is wrong? So, for example, in your dream, you're standing at your child's car window, giving them some guidance or something. And the dream ego thinks that's what you should be doing, right? It's like, this is what I should be doing. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. What if that's wrong? What if you are not meant to be doing that? And in some ways, the dream pretty clearly says, yeah, that's wrong, because then this other thing happens. The gold watch dream is a really good example of that because the dreamer woke up feeling very aligned with the attitude of the dream ego. "Ah, those watchmakers, they're such charlatans or whatever. They're trying to get over on me." And it wasn't until we sat with it a little bit and kind of said, "What if the attitude of the dream ego is wrong?" In other words, what if the watchmakers are right that the watch is worthless or almost worthless? What would that mean? And just that question can often pop us out of a sort of ego-oriented perspective, and we go, "What would that mean? What would that mean if the watchmakers are right?" So that's one example of one of the keys that I think is really just powerful. Just, it's a good one to try anytime there's conflict in the dream.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the dream I shared, the dream ego really believed that what I was doing was very important.
Mhm.
And there was a moment of feeling defensive too, as I felt that all the fathers were judging me for being
Ah,
irresponsible, and out
okay.
of control. What if they're right? There's definitely something to explore there. One thing I think is really interesting about this key is that with dreams, we're often told to look for the aha moment.
Mhm.
So, on the one hand, the conscious ego wants to jump to conclusions from the dream ego's perspective. And so, at that level, you don't necessarily want to trust your first interpretation. But then, as you start to get curious and explore more, that's when you get in touch with the deeper layers. And then you're looking for that moment of aha that comes from within, that moment of recognition. So
Mhm.
it's like on the one
Yes.
hand, don't listen to yourself. And on the other hand, listen to yourself.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, a lot of times a dream that's been well understood, we will have a moment of surprise. We will be surprised by what we've discovered.
Yeah, it won't be so obvious, but if it's accurate, not only will we be surprised, but it will feel like a connection internally. Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
And like an internal sense of click. Yeah.
exactly. I think this was in Dream School. I'm a part of your This Jungian Life Dream School, which I've really enjoyed, by the way.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
in one of the modules, Deb talked about the importance of writing down even the smallest thing from a dream, and that's something I've shared with clients too. And I used to dismiss those little bits, like, oh, it was just a coconut or it was just a line. It doesn't mean anything. But when I started writing them down and really amplifying their meaning and playing with them, I realized that even a single image or a color can reveal a lot.
Mhm, mhm.
And so that's, one encouragement I think for people to just write anything down, even if it doesn't seem significant. But also what I really liked is this idea that we're gesturing toward our unconscious and letting it know that we care and that we want to receive its guidance.
Yes.
If you want to be in a relationship with your unconscious, writing even the littlest thing down is this way of gesturing toward it to say, I'm listening.
Mhm.
And Deb described that as being like forming a sacred covenant with that deeper part of yourself. And
Mm,
I really
mhm,
love that. It's like,
mhm.
wait a minute, am I going to honor this sacred covenant and actually put this to paper? Or am I going to just say, that wasn't anything much?
We one of the biggest defenses against our dream life is we wake up and we say, "Well, it was just a little dream. Well, it wasn't that interesting." Write it down. I've heard that so many times. Someone will bring a dream into session. Maybe they won't even mention. I'll say, "Did you have a dream?" "Oh yeah, I had a dream, but I know what it means already." And I'm always like, do you now?" And it's like usually it's like, "No, no, I don't think it means what you think it means." So, and I again, I see that as a defense against the unconscious that I experience too. I wake up and think, "Oh, that wasn't much." I think it's just habitual. We wanna sort of diminish it in a sense. But, as per Deb's point about writing down even the littlest things, the dream maker picked everything with painstaking care. It's like the dream maker made this little movie for you, and it wasn't inconsequential that there was a coconut in the scene. There's a reason there's a coconut in the scene. You may or may not have an understanding eventually of why, but I guarantee you it's not random. And in terms of the sort of sacred covenant, and you're absolutely right. When we do our best to write down our dreams, we take a step toward the unconscious. The unconscious comes forward to meet us. So we start finding that we remember more dreams, or the dreams actually in some ways become easier to understand because we're engaging with the same kind of language, the same dialect. So there can be these almost like sort of inside jokes with the dream maker, or these common symbols. It's like, there I am in the airport again, going to Russia. What am I doing? It's like, okay, that situation again. Yeah, there that is. So it is like developing sort of like a really intimate working relationship with this part of yourself.
Hmm. I hadn't thought about it quite in that way before, but it's kind of like having your own secret language that develops.
Hmm.
So this is a question that I've had. I've tried doing it myself to varying effects, but I'm curious, if you're wrestling with a question or feeling stuck, if you can ask a dream for guidance or if it works that way.
So that is a very ancient technique that is known as dream incubation, and it has been practiced at least since ancient Sumeria times. And of course, it was also practiced in ancient Greece. There's a wonderful book about modern dream incubation by Machiel Clerc called Dream Guidance, and I love that book. It's very clear and also deep, and kind of tells you how to do it. We did not address it in Dreamwise, partly because Matt did such a great job, and we only had so much space. But I love dream incubation, and I sort of swear by it. So if I'm ever stuck, sometimes I ask for help with a writing project. If I'm working on a book, the dream maker has helped me in my writing, but also in a personal issue. I'll ask for guidance, and it can be pretty astounding. You kind of have to ask the right question. You have to ask one question. It needs to be an open-ended question. You want to make sure it's a question that you could sort of imagine getting an answer to from the dream. And then it's important to kind of sit with the question with some kind of intention, to let the unconscious know that you're really serious. But a lot of times, if you do this, I find that I either wake up with a helpful dream that really brings a new perspective to the issue that I've been struggling with. Or sometimes I just wake up knowing something I didn't know before. I'll just kind of wake up with a thought. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I know that when we're looking at our dreams and we're considering the meaning of our dreams, thinking about context in our lives is really important. And so in some ways there's a kind of incubation happening anyway. Whatever we're thinking about in our daily life in that moment is going to be responded to.
that's absolutely right. Yes. Yeah, I love that. I love that because sometimes people just want to come and only talk about their dreams and analysis, or people are just like, "Well, let me throw my dream into ChatGPT." But the magic of the dream really comes when you apply it to your own life. So when someone wants to come to analysis and wants to only talk about dreams and never wants to tell me anything about what's going on in their life, I'm like, what am I how can I work with that? And ChatGPT doesn't know about the fight you had with your husband last weekend or the ongoing strife that you've had internally around whether or not you want to quit your job. But the dream is likely to be commenting on things that are important to you. So I like how you put that very much, Suzanne, that there's always a kind of dream incubation going on. In fact, if you feel really stumped with a dream, one of the things you can do is ask yourself, what's been taking up mental space the past couple of days? Because it's likely that the dream addresses that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in a way saying, what question have I been asking without knowing I was asking it?
Mm-hmm. That's a nice way of putting it.
So, what you're talking about with regard to personal associations in the context of one's life makes me think about dream amplification, which you touch on in the book. And you talk about the personal associations, the factual associations, and the archetypal
Mhm,
associations, and how these layers, work together in helping us understand our dreams.
mhm.
And I wanted to introduce this as a really good way to start working with a dream,
Yep.
looking at all the elements that come up and asking, what are my personal associations with each of them? And then with the factual associations, it could be something as simple as there's a bridge, and a bridge is something that you use to get from one side of something to the other side.
Mhm,
And fleshing it out in that way can lead to some insight. And then finally, with archetypal associations, those are the larger universal kinds of patterns that we can tap into that can also amplify and help us get more insight into our dreams.
mhm. Yeah, Jung said the amplification kind of broadens the base of the interpretation, and it relates it to universal themes. But you're absolutely right. There, we talk about three levels. Jung really talked about the personal associations and the amplification. We kind of added this category of explanation, which in a way is a kind of association, but it's very specific. And so you're absolutely right. This is a really good place to start. So in talking about another key, the key for find personal associations, that one is critical. Jung said you can't understand a dream without understanding the dreamer's associations. And of course, there's a kind of general association, like if we take a look at this idea of like a table, do you have an association with the table? I don't know. It's where you eat dinner. But also, is it a specific table? Because sometimes in dreams, we're just sitting at any old table. Sometimes it's like, oh, that's the table we had in my childhood home that I used to eat dinner at all the time. And so those are very different. And especially for the latter, like it's something that is specific. It's a specific table, it's a specific car, it's a specific house or a specific kitchen or a specific tree, then you're really going to want to be interested in the personal associations. It doesn't need to be long. I sometimes will say, what's the essence of that thing? Give me, three words that you associate with that thing. Sometimes people have a tendency, at least when working in session with a dream, to sort of start on telling many, 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 many stories, especially if it's a person. Well, if it's your high school boyfriend, that obviously personal associations matter, but probably you can get to the heart of it in 2 to 3 sentences. You're looking for something that has an emotional tone. You're looking for the essence. But if you start telling me, oh, the first time we went out, and then there was this time that his mother was really upset, and another time we went and the car ran out of gas, and it's like then we've sort of gotten away from the dream image. So you want to try to avoid doing that. But you do really want to start with those personal associations because that really forms the bedrock of the interpretation. And then there can be explanation, which may be more helpful if it wasn't a specific table. You might say, well, a table is where people gather to eat. Okay, some explanations are a little juicier than others. We give this example in the book of a bread machine. It's like, well, okay, a bread machine is something that automates what used to be a very kind of high touch process. So, in some ways, it kind of has taken the humanity out of bread making. On the other hand, it's this self contained unit where you add yeast and flour and water together and you get the miracle of bread. Well, that's interesting, right? You can sort of see it as bivalent. Either it's this vessel of transformation or it's this thing that has kind of removed the human element from it. But that you're getting from explanation. That's not really a personal association. So there's personal association, there's explanation, and then there's the archetypal amplification. And for the bread machine example, bread as the staff of life is an archetype. So it can take us all the way into that realm too.
When you said the thing about the boyfriend, it made me think about what you said earlier, how believing we already know what a dream is about can actually be a form of resistance. And it's a way of, keeping the unconscious unconscious, basically. And that's such a classic example. Someone will tell me they dreamed of an ex partner and assume that it's about that relationship. So they don't look any deeper.
Hmm.
They see it as literal rather than symbolic.
Yeah.
And that made me think too about how people tend to disregard content from our day, like a movie we watched, thinking that it's about the movie. But the unconscious is actually grabbing onto things that will get our attention and that carry symbolic meaning from what we just experienced. It's not just replaying that content in our dreams, it's using it to show us something else.
Yeah, absolutely. This happens all the time where someone will say, well, and they'll tell me a dream and they'll say, oh, I think that happened because I was just reading this book. Or I think I dreamt about that because I just saw that person's sister. I mean, there is what Freud called day residue. There is a way that what things that we saw, heard, thought, did in our daily life may wind up in the dream. But I think it's important not to assume that just because it is left over from the day, that it's not meaningful. Because as you just said, the dream maker grabbed it to use it to show us something. So it's still symbolic.
Yes. Well, so shifting a little bit, do you think there's a special quality or have you found that there is a special quality to midlife dreams?
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the conversations that I was just monitoring in dream school is one of the things we have in dream school is the opportunity to join a virtual dream group. And some midlife dream schoolers were saying, we really want to be with other people about our own age. So that there was really a sense that the dreams of an earlier period of life might be really different from midlife dreams. I would say, in my experience, there is yes, I would say they are different. I don't know that they're always dramatically different, but the first part of life is about getting out in the world, establishing a career, creating a family, kind of actualizing yourself in this outer way. Classically, at midlife, you've done that and then you start turning inward. I don't think it's always quite that neat, but there's some truth to that pattern. And so a lot of times when I'm working with someone in their 20s, especially men, there will be a lot of dreams that I think of as kind of in the heroic genre. So they're doing battle, not necessarily successfully, but they're doing battle with monsters or with bigger guys, or there's this kind of need to confront something or defeat something. And that's because that really relates to the life task at that moment, that you do have to build up a strong ego and get out into the world. And that can look really differently from a midlife dream that might be more about turning in, allowing yourself to be defeated, because as Jung said, every encounter with the self is a defeat for the ego. So I wouldn't blanket say every midlife dream is different from every dream earlier in life, but as a general rule, they probably do differ.
I was thinking about it too in relation to what you said in the book. I really love this analogy where you talk about a nursing mother and how the body knows how to produce the right kind of milk for the baby, at its particular age and developmental stage. And that similarly, the dream maker knows how to present the right dream at the right moment.
Hmm.
And as you're saying, the kind of dream you might need to receive could be quite different at the beginning of your life versus in midlife. And I did wonder too, if anyone's ever done any research just about midlife and dreaming and whether there's somewhat of an increase in dreams at midlife. Because if dreams are usually about the inner life, which is one of the keys in the book, and if midlife is a time when we are, starting to want to look more inwardly and connect with the deeper self more, then it would make sense that there might be some kind of an uptick in dreams in this phase.
Yeah, what I would say anecdotally, I'm not aware of research about that. There may be some, but certainly what I can say anecdotally is that we do tend to have more dreams in periods of transformation, transition, and crisis. And that may happen at midlife. So when something kind of kicks up, then the dreams speak more loudly often. You may have more dreams, or they just may be more vivid or impactful. It is true we dream less as we get older, which is a little sad. It gets harder to grab those dreams as you get older. And I don't know why that is.
Yeah, that is curious. So I use active imagination primarily with my clients, using guided visualizations that invite encounters with the self, and then also ways of going back in and engaging with the symbols that emerge. And I'm curious whether you see a difference between guided visualizations and the imagery that arises there, compared to working with dream content.
Well, Jung felt that they were essentially, you're talking about the same
Mhm.
kinds of content. Active imagination is generated when we're awake, really. So the idea is that the ego is kind of online, but is ready and willing and open to encounter the unconscious in a waking, but slightly meditative stance. Whereas, of course, when we're dreaming, the ego is offline. And Jung felt very strongly that active imagination was one of the fastest ways to kind of catalyze psychological growth, and that it was very, very important. It's a way, I mean, one can use active imagination in conjunction with dream work because it's a terrific tool for continuing to work with the dream. So you can work with a dream by trying to interpret it, and that's mostly what we've been talking about. But you can also have a further experience of the dream by re entering the dream. And when you're awake and sort of having a conversation, for example, with the dream figure, like in your dream, you might have gone over to those dadas over at the childcare center and had a conversation. Or in the Gold Watch dream that I shared, the dreamer could have had an active imagination where he went and had a conversation with the watchmakers. So what is it you want me to know? Tell me what I need to learn from you.
Yeah, you also talk about how you can use art and also body movement as ways of working with dream content. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, one of the fun things that we're doing now in Dream School is something called Dream Studio, where we are working with art. So, drawing your dreams is another way to have an experience of them. Even if you're not a good artist, even if it's very, very simple, even if it's a stick figure, it's another way to encounter your dreams. And there's information that gets put down on the page that you may not even be aware that how that happened. How did that happen? How did the drawing, your simple, scrappy little sketchy drawing, convey something that you hadn't been aware of before about the issue that you dreamt about? And then in terms of, body movements, I mean, I think it's really important to remember that dreams spring from the unconscious and then the unconscious is ultimately embodied. So we can try to move as we did in the dream, or we can notice where the dream is in our body, or find the impulse or the feeling in the dream and say, where is that in the body? Check with your body to see if you've understood it.
Yeah. Have you ever done authentic movement?
I have had an experience of it, yes.
I found it really interesting as a way of accessing the unconscious through the body rather than the imagery that comes into the
Yeah.
mind. What is the impulse in the body suggesting you do and how you move?
Yes.
And just to share with the listeners, this is a type of movement that was developed by a Jungian analyst. And the two parts of this are that you're the mover who's turning their eyes inward, just as you might with a visualization. But you're listening to the inner impulses and just moving your body, in whatever weird and subtle ways that it wants to move, while also witnessing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's just, as with dream work, you discover things you didn't know.
Well, I love the way that creativity comes into play in dreams.
Hmm.
And I love that you're doing this dream school now and that you're working with artists to use art as a way of engaging with their dreams. And you talked about how it can help us better understand our dreams or bring new things to the surface, but it's also a great way to help with integration, by bringing the dream imagery into waking life and making it physical.
And it's another way of honoring the dream, right? Like it's great to interpret a dream and feel like you've understood it. That doesn't always happen. In fact, Probably most of the time it doesn't. I'm talking about for me, so I might have a dream and it has some really compelling imagery in it. And I might try to do an act of imagination and I do a drawing and I pull the keys and work with it. And sometimes I have that aha, I think I know what this means. And many times I don't. But I feel like if I've done some of those things, I've honored it. And Jung talks about sort of carry it around with you. And I feel like, okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna, sometimes if I draw my dream, even though I'm not a good artist, right? So these are really little terrible sketches. But I'll just take a picture of it and then set it as my wallpaper on my phone. So I just see it a lot. It's like, okay, what was that lion doing in my dream? I don't know that I still know, but hey, he's with me, that lion.
Yeah, totally. I lead a group called the Creative Return, which is a women's group where we use art and other methods for working with symbols and images. And just like you were saying, I think what's really powerful about it is when you create an image like that, first of all, you can do an act of imagination with the image so that you can look into the image and ask it, what are you communicating to me? What do you want me to know? But you can also put that image somewhere in your home where it's really visible so that even if you don't understand what it means, it continues to engage with you and have some kind of an impact.
hmm
So I think practices like that can be really powerful and fun.
Yes, very fun. I mean, the other thing about dreams is as we sort of started off saying, they are mysterious. Sometimes they're frightening, but they're also beautiful and weird and like nothing else that you're going to encounter in your waking life. And so what a wonderful thing to have in our lives. Something mysterious and creative and inscrutable.
So true. And the more we engage with that, the more we tap into our own creative source.
Mhm.
Well, as we close, I'm wondering if there was anything you would want to leave listeners with in terms of one encouragement for how to approach their next dream.
Well, the first thing I would say is don't worry too much about getting it right. I mean, we talked a little earlier about write down everything you can, which is great. That's a good thing to do. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I've had a really complex dream and I've got to get in the shower because I have an appointment. And then I just do the best I can. I just write down, maybe I just make a couple quick notes and if I can come back to it later, I do. But don't feel like you've got to do it perfectly. Just roll up your sleeves and get in there. The dream maker wants to play with you. And sort of do what you can, approach it with honest intention and integrity, but don't worry about getting it perfect.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise, it's great to talk with you. You've clearly really understood these matters, so it's really fun to talk about with you.
This has been The Deepening with Suzanne Larue. If you enjoy conversations that lead you deeper into self and soul, I hope you'll subscribe, follow, and tune in for future episodes. Thanks for joining us.